Welcome to the Endurance Drive podcast.
Our mission is to share the key principles that structure our approach to endurance training and coaching.
I'm Jim.
I'm Katie.
Hello, Katie. How are you today?
I'm good. I feel like we're in the dog days of summer, which has some great things about it. There's a lot of racing happening. And also the thing we always talk about on the podcast, which is like, it's pretty hot pretty much anywhere that you go. And it's funny, I've been in California for the last week. I'm doing sort of my summer wedding circuit all over the West Coast of travel. And it's a different kind of heat out here. It's kind of dry and it's a little cooler in the mornings, but still the UV index is 11 in the middle of the day and it gets really, really hot. And I think that actually leads me into an insight that I've been thinking a lot about, which is when you're having a day that's really hot or a day that feels tough for whatever reason, you're just not feeling it. I think it's useful to try to rebrand that as this is just time on feet. And when you rebrand something as time on feet, it doesn't really matter what pace you're going. It doesn't matter if you're hitting your intervals or not. I think this is especially applicable to kind of runners, if you're on trails, if you're on the roads, but even kind of any long distance endurance Ironman, it's valuable to just be in zone 2 outside and build durability. And then it feels less like, oh my gosh, I'm doing 13-minute miles when I know I can run 10-minute miles on this trail, because you're saying, well, all I want right now is time in feet. And time on feet can mean you're walking, you're hiking, you're doing lots of different things that are maybe not exactly in line with that ideal cool day workout. But I think that mindset shift has helped me just to not get as frustrated when I really feel like I'm not able to hit those paces.
Yeah, for sure. I think we talk about what normal workouts, NWs, like adaptive workouts. So I think a lot of that is right. And we have perseverance workouts. And I think probably that heat stuff is somewhere between perseverance and adaptive workouts, right? And I love the time on my feet. And that's where I really think like I like zone 1. You know, we never talk about zone 1, but man, zone 1 is just time on feet. Just did you get outside and move your body today? Yep. Okay, great. Awesome. Win.
Yeah. And one thing I'll add to that too is if you still want to get some type of speed stimulus, like you feel like you're slogging around literally all the time, adding strides to the end of a time on feet run day, for example, if your run turns into like, I'm only hiking on these trails today, but then you finish up and you're in the parking lot and you're like, you know what, I can do 4 by 20-second little pickups and then walk back to the start. Even if it's 95 degrees, you probably can eke that out and you do get a little bit of fast twitch. So don't be afraid to say like, okay, maybe I had a speed workout and today it's just going to be time on feet plus strides. I think that you still do sneakily get the speed stimulus that you're looking for with that.
Yeah, same thing on bike too. Easy bike, you go out and say, "Oh, I will work out." I was like, "Okay, it's hot. It's just awful. I'm going to turn it into a zone 2 easy run coffee ride." And if you're but same thing, just doing like 4 by 20 up some of the small hills on the way home, like just push up the hill a little bit. It's like, okay, we're done. Like you just need that little neural stimulus. It's one of those things like a little bit goes a long way, and if you just keep doing it over and over again, like wow, it really builds efficiency, and you keep that efficiency for a long time.
Totally. Yeah. So anyone who's just dying out there in the heat, it's probably going to be rough for another several weeks, several months. That is okay. If you need to rebrand everything for now to like time on feet, if you need to hit speed, do your strides. And if you really want to get the workout in, go inside, do the treadmill, pick the one day in the week that's not too bad. And I promise it will get a little bit better soon. But I just feel like a broken record, but also every single comment in Training Peaks is like, I'm dying and I'm a slower runner than I thought I was. And you're not. It's really just these conditions that make it really tough.
Exactly right. Well, speaking of branding, what are we doing today? We're branding ourselves as like insight people today. Is that what we're doing?
We are fully insight people for this episode. Hopefully it'll be a shorter episode, but I wasn't sure if I was even going to say that because last week you were like, we're doing a short episode. And then it came in at like an hour 10. So I actually edited out the part where you said it was going to be a shorter episode. So we'll see where we land today. But yeah, there's a lot of different insights. There are overflow insights from last week, plus some new ones that have been coming in. So maybe I'll hit a couple of mine first, and then we've got some great talking points from your insights.
Absolutely. And we just wanted to say quick good luck to folks at Ironman Lake Placid, because this is coming out a couple of days before Ironman Lake Placid. We always seem to talk about that just because it's the thing we talk about the most, I think, in terms of Ironman for the East Coast folks. But anyway, good luck. You're all going to crush it.
Yes, absolutely. Everyone's going to do so great. Okay, so my first insight here, I've got a case study to share. I love doing athlete case studies, and this is a very personal case study because I have been coaching my father-in-law, which has been really fun. He did his first sprint triathlon last year. This is part of my mission to slowly but surely convert my entire family to be triathletes. I've gotten like 2 or 3 of them so far, and we're making great progress. But anyway, he was going to do his second sprint triathlon ever. And we realized that last year, the biggest limiter that he experienced was open water swimming, which is super common for really any new athletes. And this was at the Cohasset Triathlon, which has an ocean swim. So it's not the same as like the polar bear try, which is in a pool, or these really, really calm kind of lake swims, pond swims, etc. And that was a big limiter for him last year that almost kind of made him not get through the race. He did get through it, But all this is to say, we knew that in order for him to have a good experience, he needed to have a good swim. And it's really interesting because whenever we get a new athlete, we have to think about what their goals are. And he wasn't trying to win this triathlon. He literally just wanted to be comfortable in the
Mhm.
swim. And so it was interesting to kind of design a plan and approach that was going to help him just be comfortable for this, like, probably 400-yard swim, have fun with it, and be able to then get out of the water and have a fun bike and a fun run. So if you are someone who struggles with open water swimming, if you kind of avoid signing up for races that are in an ocean, or if you maybe are not doing triathlon, like you do running or you bike just because you're afraid of the swim, I think these principles are really, really helpful. So what we did was twice a week, we were getting in the pool. We were going for minimum effective dose here. Again, he's working, he's busy, he's not trying to do triples and doubles. So it's like if we have time for a couple workouts a week, we're going to do 2 swims. And we were focused on unlocking a slow pace, which is something that I see in so many athletes is people get in the water and they just go as hard as they can from one side of the pool to the other. And inevitably, you feel a lot of panic when you do that because you're going from your resting heart rate to kind of a max effort. And then you're in the water and you can't breathe. And it's this whole thing. So the first thing I said was, we need to figure out how to swim slow. And I want you to never, ever, ever feel like you're in a rush. I want you to try to swim as slow as you possibly can.
Mm.
And we literally did that for probably
Mm.
4 weeks, twice a week, until we were doing any type of faster work in the pool. While we were doing that, it was also really important to think about when you're in the open water, you want to be good at sighting. So basically, since his only goal was like be in the pool, practice being in the pool before you can get in the open water, was all the swimming we were doing was sighting at least once per 25 because he's not
Nice.
really trying to be a swimmer. He
Yeah.
doesn't really need to
Mhm.
learn how to be a swimmer, and just pool swimmers don't really need to learn how to sight, but that was the
Mhm.
type of swimming that we were training for. We were also doing a lot of work on technique, and that starts with gear, that starts with paddles, that starts with fins, that starts with sim shorts because his goal race
Mm.
was gonna be in a wetsuit. So I was like, yeah, you
Yeah.
definitely can wear the flotation sim shorts because it's gonna
Mhm.
be great, or
Mhm.
you can do a pool buoy. And then finally, just thinking about, okay, what is your most efficient stroke? Because at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is have a really comfortable, chill swim here. And then what was great was as we did that time after time, we were basically hitting that sprint distance in every single workout within the first 15 minutes in the pool,
Mm.
and then we do a
Mhm.
little bit extra. And I think that was really meaningful because it helped build confidence. So I wouldn't say that you should do this if you're doing an Ironman because nobody has time to do 4,000 yards every time they get in the pool. But, if you're doing a half Ironman, for example, trying to work up to the point where every set is a little bit longer than that distance that you're going to have to do in the 70.3, it's not unrealistic to swim 2,500 yards. I think mentally that can really, really help you because then you're like, oh, I do this all the time. This isn't a big
Mhm.
deal. Maybe I don't do it in open water and maybe I don't do it with no breaks, but I've been doing it. And the interesting thing here too is this triathlon is in June. You usually can't get in the ocean on the East Coast
Mhm.
too soon before June. So almost all the training is going to happen in the pool. And that means we need to basically build all of the open water confidence swim skills that are happening in the pool. So once he felt really confident with all those things, some fun things that I started mixing in were like going really fast for a 25 and then nice and slow without even taking a break for the 25 back, alternating. And what
Mhm.
you're simulating there is the ability to get your heart rate back down once it does spike and knowing that you can do that. So if you get in the open water in a race, the gun goes off, you're at 175 heart rate, you don't know what to do, you start panicking. If you've already practiced the idea of, oh, I can just swim slower and then my heart
Mhm.
rate comes back down, you feel pretty confident going into the race. So it's like,
Mhm.
if that's a big limiter, then you just practice it in the pool. We even did some stuff with like, if you get other people in the pool, you pull different family members. I get in the pool, you swim at the same time. There's people around you. All of that are different ways. We actually do this a lot with the Dartmouth triathlon students, where sometimes we'll say like, all right, 6 in a lane, start at the same time. You can simulate exactly what that experience is like. And then finally, last thing here that I was big about was you don't want gear to be an issue that kind of gets in your way. Last year, his goggles basically leaked the entire time and he couldn't
Mm.
see. So we were saying
Mhm.
like, okay, we need perfect goggles that work really well. We want to make sure they're mirrored because it's usually sunny. We have a great wetsuit. All of those things are going to help you kind of on that day. The wetsuit is kind of pulled up all the way. And so all of this together, it ended up going great. He had a fantastic swim. It was low stress. He was like, I was never under stress the entire time. He took something like 4 minutes off his sprint
Wow.
triathlon swim time from last year with so much less effort, which I think really, really led to a greater race experience. But I think the broader point here is like, you don't need to swim in the ocean every day to get great at open water. Just simulate the things that you're worried about. And maybe your goal is not to have the perfect open water swim. Maybe your goal is like, I know my limiter in a half marathon is that I go out way too hard. Well, then choose lots of workouts that show you how to go hard late in the day. And
Mhm.
maybe in biking, for example, it's like I always go way too hard on the hills. Well, I'm going to build workouts that force me to count my power on the hills. We can always design a plan like that. It's really fun to do it with the coach. But yeah, it's really fun for me to have like challenges like this where we think about
Mhm.
what's the goal. It's not one size fits all. And we can figure out exactly kind of how to get people there.
I think, so we joke a lot on this podcast about not being swimmers, not wanting to swim, the pool, bitching about this and that. But the reality is that both you and I have spent a lot of time in the pool, and we actually find it very engaging. And we do, and we actually do like to swim because it's very intellectually challenging. So sitting here as you're describing all this, I was thinking, like, isn't it ironic that probably the thing that we sort of poo-poo the most, the swim, is probably the thing where you need the coach the most, right? And I think this is where we bring a lot of value to our clients. Obviously, this is a great case study of like this person. And Dan right here, he's in the middle of the bell curve. This is what most of our folks want to do. They want to get in the water. They want to feel safe. They want to swim well. But how do we do that, right? And that's totally different than going to master swim, for example, right? Like you get in shape when you go to master swim, and there's nothing wrong with master swim. Like I have a lot of people doing that. But all the things that you just described, all these skills, all these things to think about, the strategies, the pacing, the gear, how to navigate around people. You're never going to face that in a master's swimming group. So anyway, there's a lot there. It's very, very, I would say it's complicated, but there's a lot going on there. And I think as triathletes, we have this extra burden to learn. For many people, to learn this very foreign sport, which is kind of a scary sport, and all these skills. And sometimes, like the solution is go bike more, right? Like a lot of times that solves a lot of things, right? And sometimes just running is running. Most people can run, and they're not going to drown if they're running. But there's a lot on the line with swimming. So anyway, it's just very interesting. It's a very rich environment for the athlete and the coach.
Yeah, and it's nice. I mean, it makes me a better coach every time I stand on deck and watch a swimmer because I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, that's what they're
Mhm.
doing. This is a default thing that's a little bit different than the last person. And this is how I need to explain this in a way that helps them. And then it like makes me faster for the once a month time that I then get in the pool. So we do poo it a little bit. But again, I think becoming confident in the water, it's a skill that's very different. You need some aerobic fitness, but you're already working on your aerobic fitness bucket kind of in the running, in the biking, etc. And so, yes, we were doing an Ironman, build up that swim endurance. But the best way to get there, I think, is technique and skills and comfort in the open water. So that's what we're trying to do here at the Endurance Drive. It's all about technique and skills.
It is, and I mean, we're lucky that we've had a lot of time on deck watching people and learning, and people teach us, right? And so
Mhm.
again, we're like with this situation, you're like, okay, I have maybe 10 sessions with a student or with Dan or whatever, right? It's like, okay, what can I do in 10 sessions, which isn't that much to get them to swim 500 yards in the open water? Like that focuses the brain pretty quickly, and I think we're just really lucky because we get a chance to see folks in action, like in the pool, and see body movement and see what people respond to and how they respond to, whatever, techniques, right? We don't do a lot of drills because drills are just a kind of a little bit of a waste of time. But how can we put them in position early, like you say, with all these gear, with sim shorts, whatever it is, whatever it takes to put you in that position first and then begin to teach you these skills. So yeah, I just think we're really lucky here. And I think we're also in a very unique position because I don't think a lot of triathlon coaches always get a chance to be on deck or to, be really hands-on with their swimmers.
Yeah, maybe this is the time to say thank you to anyone who has like been in the pool while we've been on deck. And I will say it's a pretty vulnerable place to be. You're like flailing around trying not to die, and someone's kind of telling you, hey, like reach higher, show your elbow, all of that. But
Hmm.
we learn a lot from it. And I think that usually makes people better swimmers and us better coaches. So
Yep,
we
for
love
sure.
swimming as long as we're not in the
Nice.
water. It's great.
Well, nice job to Dan. Wow, 4 minutes off. That's huge.
I
Now,
know.
you work with me because I want 4 minutes off my swim.
That's my promise. 4 minutes in a sprint triathlon for anyone who does a 10 lesson package with me.
I guarantee it.
All right. So, my last little insight here, and then you've got some really great ones I want to dig into, is called triathlons are not apples to apples. And this came up recently because I had an athlete who did, I believe it was their second half Ironman. The first race that they had done was the Patriot Half, which many of our listeners are probably familiar with. If you're not from the New England area, you may not have heard of it, but it's a smaller race. I think it's put on by either Sun Multisport or Max Performance, one of those kind
Mhm.
of local
Yep.
companies. And I like it because it is probably one of the most intro to triathlon, family friendly, easier courses that you can choose for a half Ironman. This was the first half Ironman that I ever did in 2017. So this athlete started with that last year and then was going to do a different half Ironman this year that was very different in terms of terrain. It was a lot hillier. The weather was different. So last year, I think, was a very good year to race Patriot. It wasn't too hot. The second race that they did was a stormy day. There were big swells in this lake. It just turned into a very, very, very different course. And I think ultimately this athlete came out of the second race a little bit disappointed because they knew they were a lot fitter than they were last year, but their time didn't necessarily reflect that gain in fitness. They went faster last year. And I just want to remind athletes that in general, triathlons are not really apples to apples. I think runners are usually used to saying, like, okay, this is my 5K PR. I've done a 5K on a track in a controlled environment, and this is how fast I can do it, or this is my marathon PR. Now, there's a big difference, of course, between running a hilly marathon and a flat marathon, a hot one and a cold one, etc. But triathlons are so much harder than that. And as a further case study here, my Patriot Half in 2017, in fact, I believe is my fastest half Ironman on record. I would destroy the 2017 version of me in 2018, 2019, 2020, all the way through today, would absolutely run her into the ground. But I had the perfect day there of 68 degrees, low humidity, no wind, and a really easy course. And then every other half Ironman I've done since then has had a lot of challenges attached to it. So I just think in general, hesitate to compare like your PR in an Ironman, half Ironman, even sprint and Olympic tries, just because even the distances vary, especially for local sprints and Olympics. Like, Dan, my father-in-law, is doing another sprint later this summer, and it's a 21-mile bike as opposed to the 12-mile bike with Cohasset. So I'm not going to compare those two times at all. We can compare kind of maybe the pace that he went or different things like that. But in general, try to just evaluate each race within the context of what those conditions are. And don't think that you're less fit just because you had a slower time. You really need to drill into what are all these conditions here. And we don't even really have an algorithm that can quantify, like if we take the weather and we take the wind and we take the course and the distance, this is actually how we compare these two courses. I think my biggest advice is like, if you care so much about having the fastest time possible, then choose a course that's going to be like Patriot, that's going to hopefully be fast and flat and easy. And if you care about a really cool experience, that's why I'm going to pick like Ironman Lake Placid. Not because it's fast, but because it's beautiful and it's really cool and I love the area. So just be kind to yourselves. And congrats to this athlete too, who did really crush that second race. But it's like, are you racing your 5K on a track or are you doing it on a mountain? They're just two different things to compare.
It was interesting too, is like even thinking about like some of the races that we do for the Dartmouth team, Buzzards Bay is a great one. Right? So Buzzards Bay, people go every single year. But the weather and the ocean are completely different every single year. And some years we show up and the water is flat and it's a pretty fast swim. And other years we show up and there's 4-foot swells and it's absolute utter chaos. And sometimes they shorten the swim and they put, so like not even, you can't even compare year to year at a sprint triathlon at the same exact venue because it's just totally different.
I mean, I did Patriot Half again in 2021, and it was like 95 degrees and 100% humidity, and I had a slow, bad day. And I was really hard on myself because I was like, wow, I guess I'm not any fitter than I was 4 years ago. But if I'd done that race 4 years ago, I probably would have walked the whole thing. And so it's just, it's not always fair to make that comparison. And yeah, you're totally right about even within the same race. And I think that holds too for some run races. You look at, for example, different Boston marathons, you look at the winning times, you look at, the year that Des Linden won, and it was like 40 degrees and torrential rain the entire time. Last year was really hot. There's just so many different conditions that you can get thrown at you, and weather matters, terrain matters. All of that will impact your time more than you think.
There were a number of years where it was early Strava years where I was way into segments, chasing segments. This is when I lived in Alaska. And one of the biggest takeaways was that anything that was pretty much over 2 minutes, environmental factor was the deciding factor, whether you got the top 10 or not. And it's this whole truth. So you think about like, okay, anything over 2 minutes, it's really about which way is the wind blowing. And so now factor that out for, yes, even just a sprint or an Olympic. I mean, like, it's just the environment plays such a huge, huge part in everything. So yeah, and then to make it a little bit more confusing is then Ironman has a lot more downstream swims now with various races. And so people say, well, I swam 12 minutes faster at that. Well, that's because it was downstream. And so how do you even compare, anyway, like you say, it's not apples to apples. And like you say, be kind to yourself and you are getting fitter. You are getting faster.
Yeah, and if you want a little ego boost, choose a Strava segment that's in the direction of a really, really strong tailwind, and you will have the best day ever. I have one segment, QOM, I believe, down in Cohasset on a segment called Fighting Headwinds because there's always a headwind. And one day the direction of the wind switched and it was 20 miles in the other direction. And I was like, all right, I'm going out with the TT bike. And, it was probably a 2-minute segment. And again, I'm pushing 30 miles an hour without trying that hard. But it's just because of the wind. So yeah, whoever I took that from, sorry, but you just got to be smarter with the wind that way.
I have a segment in Anchorage. Same thing, the wind was pretty much from the south or southeast, and one day we got kind of a north wind, and I was on my TT bike, and it was a pretty strong north wind, and I still have that K1 from 2014. And it's going to be really hard to break because, like, A, you have to have a really strong north wind, and B, you got to be in a TT bike, and just those two things combined, like, I don't think it isn't going to happen, so.
And you've got to be one of those crazy people like us that like actually studies the weather and the segments and knows it so well and goes out on those days. So
We are,
you'll be
folks, we are not well adjusted, so do not follow our lead.
All right. On that note, Jim, your turn for insights. You've got some great stuff here.
Sure. So I want to talk through this first one with you and get your insights as well. But I've been thinking about this sort of idea, like capacity, building your endurance bucket. So I'm often talking. You guys have know this. I'm often talking about like buckets, right? And the size of your bucket is sort of this capacity, right? And then the water that's in your bucket is like your energy. And so kind of the main goal of all this endurance training is just like to get bigger capacity, right? But basically make your bucket bigger, and then you have more energy, right? So it's been interesting because I've had some new clients come to me, and they're some fast, single sport athletes, and they say, "I want to go to triathlon," and they get into triathlon, and maybe they're, say, for example, they're a really fast runner, and they sign up for maybe a half Ironman or Ironman or Olympic, for example, something that requires a bit of capacity, a bit of endurance. And by the time they get to the run, they're like, "Wow, I ran really, really, really slow." And what's the deal? Like, my superpower is running. And it's like, really, the simple answer is that your endurance bucket, your capacity is still pretty small, right? We just need to build it up over years of time. And sort of then the other factor here is, I think about these spigots, right? Like, your bucket has 3 spigots. You've got a small spigot, which is really just drains your energy slowly. And this is sort of a pacing thing, right? But you would sort of open up the small spigot on your bucket for things like half Ironmans, marathons, that kind of thing, bigger ultra marathons. And you have another spigot, it's a medium spigot, and that sort of handles like a moderate energy output. So you think about like half Ironman, long Olympic distance triathlons, half marathons, or maybe your typical weekend long run. And then you have this large spigot, the thing you really, really go for it. So this is for the short, intense efforts, like sprint triathlons, hard group rides, intervals, 5K, 10K races. And this one really drains your bucket really, really quickly in 90 minutes. So again, my first point here is that, again, common frustration is that these new athletes, they have a small bucket, and then they may just turn that spigot, that large spigot, and just crank it out. And by the time they get to the run, like, oh, I am done. And so probably what they should have done is they should have, because their bucket wasn't that big and they had much water in there, they should have gone with a medium spigot, sort of better pacing, drain that energy, more even over time. So anyway, there's just a lot of experience. So not only are you building your capacity, you're also building racing as a skill. So now, okay, what is my pacing? How much energy, how much capacity do I have? How do I start at minute 1 swimming and end with my bucket somewhat empty on the last, few hundred meters of the run? It's a really hard skill to have. So that's why we want triathletes to train, to build it, and also to race, to sort of understand, okay, how do I drain this bucket sort of evenly? Which spigot do I use and when do I use it? So the second point here is that I also have some older athletes, and what we see is that they have this big, huge bucket, right? They have all kinds of huge bucket. They've been training for years. They got plenty of water, but the problem is that they haven't been using the large spigot to drain their energy, right? We typically, and I'm guilty for this, like, we just kind of go out and do long, slow distance stuff, right? Feels good to go towards zone 1, zone 2, and we stop doing things like strides that we mentioned at the beginning here, right? And we stop losing that thing. So the other point here is that, so if you've not a new athlete, but you're an experienced athlete, is that you need to turn on that large spigot sometimes. So do your strides, do some pushes, and really keep the ability to that functionality of that spigot, because it's a typical use it or lose it kind of situation.
Yeah, no, I think this is spot on. And I also want to say I love when your metaphors are like a little bit North Country inspired. This is like the farm and the buckets, which is awesome. But I think in my experience too, I think probably the bucket that you need to work on the most is the one that you like to work on the least. So this is just like the older athletes that you're talking about. I think this is me too sometimes, where I love to go out in zone 2 for the entire day. And I can keep that small spigot running for the entire day. And I've sometimes prided myself on like, I think I can just keep going forever and ever as long as you keep the fueling up. However, I get really nervous when I have to do these short, hard, fast intervals, and I'll kind of procrastinate that workout during the week. But the more that you kind of try it, you turn the large spigot on for a little while, the less scary it becomes because you've practiced it. So I think if you're not sure where you land across these buckets, maybe you have a really good sense, maybe you don't know. Think about which bucket you like the most. Do you like the long, long, slow? Do you like the short and fast? And then channel your energy and workouts into the opposite bucket, because that's probably where you need to be spending most of your time.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's great. And often, we throw in a lot of uphill, sprints and intervals for our athletes. And then always the ones who say, I don't really like the uphill ones. They're really challenging. And then I'm always like, oh, perfect. That's the ones we're going to do the most.
Yeah, and it's tricky. I mean, the motivation there, I find that they're so short, like 20-second sprints or something. It's sometimes easy to just skip them. And for me, I really have to say, like, okay, just do one. Like, just do one. And then I probably will actually do all four or six or eight or whatever it is. But trying to get yourself to do one is really hard when you're just enjoying kind of going along at that easy pace because it is a completely different energy system. You have not recruited any fast twitch for the entirety of your like lovely jaunt in the trails, but it takes you like what, less than 5 minutes to get all those strides done. I'm trying to make myself do that. It is still really hard. So hopefully listeners, my athletes, anyone else can hold me accountable to do that. It's helpful to work with a coach, of course, who's putting that in your plan for you. But maybe the upshot here is unless it's really kind of extenuating circumstances, don't skip your pickups and don't skip your strides.
Yeah, that's the challenge of the week every week, really, for all of
Don't
us.
skip
Yeah,
your strides.
so
Yeah.
exactly right. So, but this one leads into my next point, which I'm calling open water 10-10s. But basically, so I've started swimming more recently. Just it's been so nice out. The water's been nice. I was like, I'll get back in and do the swimming thing. But my tendency is to get in the water and I'll go swim maybe a couple thousand yards and I'll swim at the same pace. And that's kind of what most of us do. Just go, let's go for a swim. But what I started finding doing is what I'm calling 10-10s, which is just starting with like 10 really hard strokes, then just going to 10 easy strokes. And then just doing this for maybe like 400 or 500 yards. And so it lends itself well to, an easy 10, 15-minute warm up, maybe you go 500 yards or something like that, and then go off and do a bunch of 10-10s. And then as you get more warmed up and you get more fit, you can turn those 10-10s into like, I'm going to do 12 strokes, I'm going to do 14 strokes, or even up, up to 20 or 25 strokes, right? And it's, Katie, it's what you talked about with Dan, which was doing, 25 fast, 25 easy, 25 fast, 25 easy, right? And you start doing that out in open water, and suddenly, so 25 strokes probably in open water is very equivalent to 25 yards, 25 meters. So you're basically doing 25 fast, 25 easy, 25 fast, 25 easy. Anyway, I just found this a really easy way to incorporate some speed, to get a little more stimulus out there, gain swim fitness a little bit faster for myself, and just sort of bump me out of my like zone 1, zone 2, just lollygagging out there.
Yeah, I love that. And I think something that's tricky with open water swimming is when you don't have a wall, it's really hard to structure any type of workout. Like a lot of time people just go out and they just swim easy and they're like, wow, that was pretty slow. And there are many other factors that make you swim slower in open water. You should expect that you're gonna be slower than you are in the pool. But I think again, without having something natural to break things up, that can make hard. So I love the idea of saying I'm gonna count strokes. One other thing that you can do that I've had some athletes experiment with is, at least on Garmin, the default swimming setting is that the watch beeps every 500 yards. You
Mm-hmm.
could make it beep on another interval. So if you want it to tell
Mm-hmm.
you every time you hit 100 yards, and you could say, I'm going to do 100 fast, 100 easy. There's lots of different ways to play with it like that. What I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't recommend doing is trying to stare at your watch and figure out, like, okay, that was a fast 50 and this is going to be an easy 50. It's going to drive you totally insane. But again, play with the beeps or just count strokes, and you can get really creative with 10-10s, or it's into 12-12s, 20-20s, etc. That's a great way to do kind of a structured, unstructured open water swim workout.
Yeah, I have an athlete who sets it every 300 yards, and for some reason, and he told me why, I forgot exactly why, but it just sort of made sense. Like, oh, right, that's a little bit shorter than the 500, and maybe he's getting a quick glance at the watch at 300, but it sort of gives you a better check, a little bit earlier on. So yeah, I think that's a great idea, is that you can change that. I wouldn't do it at every 100 because we're triathletes and we don't end up stopping every single 100. we
Exactly.
we gotta love that data, us triathletes. So, but this brings me to my next point, which is tears. Since I jumped back in the water, and I think most of our athletes experience this, is getting some cramps like in your feet and your calves and your legs when you first start it. And every year I'm like, why does this happen? And part of it is just that, I think cramps happen. There may be some hydration stuff there. There may be some electrolyte stuff there, some energy, and also just putting your muscles, your body in a different position it hasn't been in. So I think that creates the cramps. But what I found, and this is terrible technique, so do not do this very often, but if you start to cramp, what I found, if I dorsiflex my feet, which is basically bring my toes towards my shins, and I kick out a little bit wider, again, terrible, terrible, terrible swim technique, slows you right down. It's the worst thing to do. But I find by sort of breaking that tension of being plantar flexion into dorsiflexion, it sort of just breaks up that, I don't know, the tension maybe in my muscles. And I've gone from like, I'm getting a foot cramp. And every time I've almost gotten a foot cramp, I basically get a foot cramp. And then basically the swim session's over, or you just suffer out there and you hang on to your swim buoy and go, I hope this thing goes away. But what I found this year is I've been able to dorsiflex quite a bit and actually get those to go away. And that's the first time I've ever experienced that. So again, not good swim technique, but it sure beats cramping up in the middle of a lake.
Yeah, I mean, not good swim technique would be you sinking to the bottom of postponing because of a cramp. So I think if you need to dorsiflex, it's just like a stretch, right? I mean, if you have a
Yeah,
cramp
right.
on land, it makes sense
Yep.
to try to stretch it out.
Mhm.
So I think that's a
Yep.
great idea.
Yep.
I love it.
Exactly right. Yep. Something I've been doing a lot this summer as well. I've been riding my bike a bunch, and what I've been doing is I've been climbing these hills by splitting them into thirds, and this is something I tried to do this year, which is so basically it's a really simple tactic, and you guys can try it out. So approach a hill, and a lot of times I kind of know the size of the hill, but sometimes I forget. I look up the hill right away. I look up first. Okay, what am I dealing with here? Right? Just get an assessment here. Like, was it really steep? How long is it? But what I'll do is I'll pick a couple points on the hill that I can see and say, okay, to this point here, maybe about a third up, I'm going to go really, really, really easy. So I'm going to go smooth, easy, and I'm going to start thinking about relaxing my breath, big breaths, relaxing my hands, relaxing my shoulders, relaxing my face, and just saying, okay, you have to just ride as relaxed as possible to that point, which is about a third of the way up the hill. And then generally what happens on most hills, they tend to kick up a little bit more, it seems like, in the second third. And so at the second third, I'm still trying to maintain that sort of relaxed position and mindset, but you know that maybe your watts are going to go up, your average is going to go up because it's getting harder. And so at that point, I think, okay, the second third of this hill, it's like, I call it like appropriate work. Like, yeah, I'm working and it's pretty hard. It's the steep hill. And so if I start to feel difficult, I'm breathing harder, I'm sweating more, I'm like, yeah, that's about right. That's kind of what I expected to happen in the second third of this. But then reserving something. So for the last third, so if I get to that second point and the hill keeps going, I can then make a decision and say, okay, well, I can go strong because I have a little bit more energy to go to the top of the hill and go over the top of the hill and get speed on the top of the hill, or I can maintain the speed or whatever it is. But I've now got 2/3 of the way up the hill, and I feel like mentally I'm sort of engaged, and I'm sort of like, okay, I'm 2/3 of the way there already. Okay, great. I've got more to give with this hill, and now I can make a decision. Now I'm in charge. The hill's not in charge. I'm in charge of what I want to do, as opposed to sort of seeing a hill charging right into it and getting about halfway up the hill and going, oh, I'm dying. And you feel the lactate acid, and you go, oh my God, this is the worst. And then the hill sort of is what dominates you, right? And you feel like, oh, am I going to make it up the hill? So anyway, try this out. First third, look up the hill, 2 points. First third, super easy, relaxed. Second third, yep, appropriate. That's about right. Next third, give it more or not. And sometimes I'll get up and I'll see the second point, and it turns out that's the end of the hill. I'm like, oh, that's even better. Like that's it. That's the end of the hill. Perfect. So I have more energy now for the next hill.
This is great. It's funny because you're describing the exact way that I tell people to pace like a half marathon, for example. It's split it into thirds, in control in the first one, and then kind of hold steady in the middle. And then if you can, push it at
Yep.
the end. But there is something about that beginning, middle, end progression that I think really, really helps mentally. So I love kind of mapping it up to hills, to biking. And I think the biggest point, if you took anything home from that, is don't start by going really, really hard, which we see all of the time. And a lot of people don't know how to ride hills. And I love that we spent a lot of time talking about how to ride hills recently. But I think this is a really good granular way to approach it.
Yeah, we have a lot. I mean, I think about it, like almost all of our athletes have hilly races, right? Whether it's Iron, it's Iron Lake Placid or Maine or really anything around here. I just mentioned Patriot, probably more of a flatter course, but that's kind of an outlier, right? I mean, we generally have a lot of hilly courses up and down the east coast of the U.S. So anyway, yeah, I just been trying to get better at it, and then just more mindful. And I feel like I'm reading terrain better. I feel like I'm more aware of what's going on out there, as opposed to just like putting my head down and just looking at the pavement, going, "Oh man, not another hill."
I love that. Yeah, exactly. Well, this is a nice segue. We love good segues into maybe you had a hilly race. Talk to me about transition weeks.
Yeah, so something that new I've been trying this week is, so typically, any good training plan, all of our coaches will do a recovery week or recovery weeks after a big race, any race. And it could be, a big race could be a 5K race, or it could be an Ironman, whatever it is. But generally the week after any race, we say, hey, it's a recovery week. Let's get recovered physically, mentally. Let's just go easy. Don't think about being an athlete. Just, go have fun, whatever it is, right? So do whatever you need to do on that recovery week to show up, to either train again or take off season, whatever it is. But so I have a number of athletes who they've done maybe a number of races this year already, and they're looking now at fall races, October races, maybe they qualify for Worlds, or they're doing something bigger in October, November. And so what I've been doing is doing a recovery week or recovery 2 weeks, and then I'm doing this thing called what's a transition week. And what it is it's just kind of interesting. I just thought of this model this year. It's like, I don't really want to jump back into structured training, because a lot of folks have been training since last year, or been structured since January 1st, and it's kind of a grind to kind of jump back in. Like, I got one recovery week, now I'm jump back into more structured training. I just don't feel like that creates a sustainable model for folks. So I just say, okay, we're going to have at least one transition week. I'm going to give you, instead of assigning like miles, I'm going to say, instead of saying 6 miles, you're going to run 6 miles on Tuesday. It's like, hey, 30 minutes to 60 minutes today, go run, right? And you can do 30, you can do 60. And I'll do the same thing also with bikes as well. Hey, go ride for 1 or 2 hours, maybe the weekends, 2 or 3 hours. If you feel like it, push up some hills. If not, go for it. So there is some structure in there, right? We all, as triathletes, we love a plan. We want to see something in our training peaks. So there is something in there, right? And there's some direction of which way to go. And then as a coach, I have to sit back and say, okay, what's going to happen in transition week? What kind of workouts are they going to do? Do they default to, to just going hard all the time? Do they take advantage of it? Like, what kind of comments? Are they still tired? Are they really enthusiastic? And I think as a coach, and you can do this as yourself, you're self-aware, just making notes after your workouts on transition week is like, how are you feeling? How did that transition week go? And I like to kind of go actually do 2 transition weeks now and just sort of sit back and say, how are we doing, right? And you'll find out, like, just from the comments or how are you, how people are feeling. And generally I find, because most people are pretty motivated, like after a week or two, they're like, I want to get back to real structured training. I want to get going. But I've now bought ourselves almost a little bit of a mini off season, right? It's a sneaky off season in some ways, right? It's not programmed. And so you've got the recovery week or 2 weeks. You maybe got 1 or 2 transition. And now you're ready to think about jumping back into structured training for your big fall races.
Yeah, I think this is right. And maybe my only caveat is that you have to know yourself as an athlete. Because I have a handful of athletes who, if I say 30 to 60 minutes of easy running, they will inevitably do 65 minutes of easy running and max out every single possible range. And on the other hand, like some people might not even hit that 30 minutes. So know yourself,
Mhm.
know what you need. But I think actually listening to your body in these contexts and actually saying, like, I'm going to run 30 minutes and then see how I feel at that point. I think that gives you the flexibility to really listen. And again, one of the best skills that we want our athletes to develop over time is the ability to listen to your body and modify on the fly. And that's true even if you have super structured intervals in the middle of your season. You do also need to be able to listen to your body. So this is a great principle. I love this rather than just like turning people loose to do whatever they want for 3 months until their big race. But yeah, actually respect that the range is an okay range and you don't have to max it out.
Yeah, exactly right. And my last one here, sort of related to this, is that most of our athletes, are really good at knowing what the intention of the workout is. And so this is sort of the reminder we do maybe once a month or once every 6 weeks or so. But the plan is a map and it is not the territory. I like to say it's the difference between looking at a paper map and the reality of you driving in Boston in a car. It's a very, very different thing. So again, as remote coaches, we are trying to do our best to follow along with what you're doing, how you're feeling, responding to your comments. But again, like you talk about at the beginning of this podcast, hey, it's hot outside. And the workout said, 6 by 2 minutes at 10K speed today. Well, you know what? I'm going to do 2 by 2K because it's super hot outside. Great. Go for it. Like that's the way you're feeling. That's your responding. You're adapting the workout. The intention, but you're adapting it. Or maybe you do time on feet, right? But anyway, so we're doing our best here, but just always know like we're making our sort of our best guess about how things might theoretically be in your life in maybe a week from now, which is totally not generally not in reality at all to what may be on that day. So anyway, modify as you need to. Again, we're doing our best, but you know you best.
Yes, I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think we say often, like, we are the experts on principles, but you are the experts on you and on your life and on your body. So it is okay to prioritize those things first, and then we'll kind of help in the background.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Wow.
amazing job being pretty efficient. We
Here
might
we
actually
are. I
be a
know.
little shorter, and I can make my next flight, which is in a very short time. So let's close it out. We've got one question here, which is it better to ingest carbohydrates through gels, drinks, or bars? Tell us your science insight of the week, Jake.
Yeah, sure. So I dug into this one a little bit. Turns out that the TLDR is that it doesn't really matter. You can do gels, you can do drinks, and you can do bars, and they pretty much all do the same thing in terms of carb oxidation. I put a couple links here to studies. You can check that out yourself. But I thought that was kind of cool because I don't know if I would have known the answer to that. I maybe would have said like, oh, gel is probably the best, that kind of thing, and then maybe drinks and then bars. I don't know, but it turns out like go for it. Whatever you like, go for it. It'll work.
Yeah, and test it out before your race because you might find that for you personally, bars are disaster and drinks are perfect, or drinks make you slosh around and you need to go with gels. So there probably is an answer for everybody, but we cannot tell you in terms of principles like this is better for oxidation.
Yep. Actually, it's interesting. I had an athlete ask me about the Martin bars today. And I was like, oh, those things I have a bunch here. They are so chewy. I can barely get them down when I'm in my house. And I had to specifically, I'll eat them like for a pre-snack workout, but there's no way in hell I'd ever get one of those things down. Like if they're passing them out on course, oh, God bless the people, because you'd have to stop for like 5 minutes and jump away in that thing. I really like it. It tastes good. It feels like it gives you good energy, but like it's horrible on the
It's like a
race
sticky,
course.
thick Rice Krispie treat. Like, it tastes good.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
delicious. It's like a syrupy Rice Krispie treat, but yeah, I agree. Like, you'll take one bite and your teeth are glued together for the rest of the race, which is
Right.
not fun when you already have a lot of sugar in your mouth.
Exactly. No, you bite into one, you think, like, this is not a snack. This is a project.
Challenge of the week, bring a toothbrush for T2 so you're ready. We're like all the essentials in T2, including a toothbrush. All right, my real challenge of the week is not to bring a toothbrush. Don't take me literally on that, but it is to schedule a PT or a massage for a few days after your next big race or workout. You're going to want it. It's an amazing time to do it. We've talked about how doing like a really intense massage right before your race might not be the very best call, but you will thank, future you is going to thank you if you know that 2 days after Ironman like Classic, you're going in for a sport massage. So schedule that now.
I love it. Mine is obvious. Include some 10-10s in your open water swimming.
That's predicated on the fact that I'm actually into open water swimming, but I like the idea.
Good point. Right. Exactly.
Challenge of the week for Katie, just get in the water.
Just get in the water. Right. The wind is getting to the pool, Katie.
So yeah, the wind is getting wet. I'm gonna take a shower and then that'll be the wind. But anyway, gear pick of the week. I'm gonna recommend what I think is a fantastic foam roller. The Trigger Point Grid 1.0. I think this is the best foam roller that's out there. It is probably a little bit pricier than some of the ones that you can get on Amazon, but it's really, really dense. So I think if you want to invest in a solid foam roller, and I don't think it's over the top. I think last time I checked, it was maybe on the order of $40 or something like that. I think this is a great investment and everyone should foam roll a little bit more. This is also a challenge of the week for me. I should be doing more of this. But if you have one that's a fun color and super comfortable, you might be a little bit more likely to do it and leave it somewhere that you know you'll see it, like by your TV. If you're going to watch TV, sit down and roll for 5 to 10 minutes before you watch TV or while you're watching TV and do it with the Trigger Point Grid.
Well, it's funny about Trigger Point because I came across some old Trigger Point gear I had in the pain cave recently. And when Trigger Point first came out, there wasn't a lot of like alternatives, and they had the market kind of cornered, and it was super expensive. So I found a couple of the old pieces of gear, and I was going to give away some gear recently to the dump, and I grabbed those, and I was like, oh man, this is a tiny little roller. And I was like, this roller's probably like $50 when I bought it like years ago. So like, I can't give this away. This is ridiculous. It was ridiculously expensive, but you're right. The prices all come down now. I agree. The Trigger Point's awesome. My gear pick of the week is some people asking me like, what kind of tires should I put on my bike? And I use the Continental GP 5000 bike tires for everything. I use it for racing versus for training. They're kind of the perfect mix of durability and speed. And so just go with that. Don't think of anything else. You can use it for dirt. Really just the best all-around tire out there.
Yes, and you can get these on Amazon. If you don't know how to install them on your bike, a bike shop can help, but I think it's a really good exercise in understanding your bike to try to put the tire on by yourself. So when you have a lot of time, sit down, try to do it. Again, it might be tricky if you have really, really tight rims or things like that, but that's helped me kind of understand my bike better is putting new tires on the bike.
Yeah. Try to put tires in your bike, get frustrated, then go to the bike shop. That's the order. That's the order.
And I will say, wait, can I debunk a myth right here? If you're new
Yes.
to your bike, you don't understand anything about it. There are tubes and there are tires. A lot of people use those terms interchangeably, but the tube, as long as you don't have tubeless, goes inside of the tire, which is on the outside. So you might know how to change a tube, but you do need to replace your tires every so often. And usually a good way to tell is a fresh tire. You can see these little grooves in it, like the treads. If your tire is really, really old, those are completely worn through and you can't see them anymore. And if you have really old tires, you're going to get flats a lot more often. So if you're getting recurrent flats, I would say you might actually just need new tires. Don't just keep changing your tube and putting it in a really old tire.
Yeah, I'd say for most of our athletes, I think every 1 to 2 years, you're going to want to change your tires. I had an athlete this week said, hey, these are my tires. I'm like, well, how old are your tires, by the way? And like, oh, like 5 years? I'm like, oh my gosh, of course, you must change those. Also, they kind of get flat. You look at the back tire, and you'll notice a little flat spot as well, too, on there. So yeah, it's a small price to pay. And again, like, that's a great suggestion. Like, get tires and just mess around with them. You'll get them on, and then you'll know how to change a tire and a tube.
And have them on hand, because I will say one of the worst mechanicals is when you run over like a nail or something and get an actual hole in your tire, not just your tube. That has happened on many rides we've been on before. So if you have one at home, then you're not going to have to actually go to the bike shop and deal with it. But you probably don't need to carry the tire with you while you're riding. It's a little bit too big for your change kit unless you're doing some type of crazy cross-country adventure. Then have all the gear that you need. But yeah,
that's a good point though. Wait, if you are looking for new tires, obviously the bike needs 2 tires and 2 tubes. But what you really want to do is you want to buy 4. You want to buy 4 tires and you want to buy 4 tubes because you just want them around. Because when you need them, and there's no substitute for them, and you might as well just buy them all at once. Because if you buy 2, one's going to go flat right away. Like, oh no, and then you go to Amazon. So anyway, yeah, just buy twice as many as what you need, have them around, and then you'll use them.
As they always say, 4 is 2 and 2 is none. So
That's exactly what the special forces say. Yes.
awesome. Well, thank you so much to everyone for listening. Again, huge good luck to everyone who's racing Ironman Lake Placid this weekend. And in the meantime, please consider dropping us a like, a comment, a share, a rating, a review, sharing it with someone that you know who wants to learn about the special forces or foam rollers. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, peeps.